There is a long-standing belief among Pokémon fans that purchasing a new game on release isn't a good idea, as Gamefreak have a habit of releasing a third, more complete title a year later. This third title tends to take the best of the games, builds upon them, while adding more depth to the story and the world in general. Many of the best and most loved moments in the Pokémon games have come as a direct result from these third titles, such as the Battle Frontier in Pokémon Emerald and Pokémon Platinum's Distortion World. Well, what if I was to tell you that the idea of a third game is not only actually a rare occurrence in the Pokémon games, but also something we are unlikely to ever see again? You're watching PTM, and today we will be looking at Pokemon's third games. Before we get into today's video, do remember to like and subscribe, as every time you do it helps me grow and it keeps you interacting with all these videos. Okay, so let's take this back to the start. When did the third game trend appear? Well, many believe it to actually be with Pokémon Yellow. Pokémon Yellow was the third main series game released to us here in the West, and it's easy to see why people consider it to be the third version of Red and Blue. After all, the region and story are the same, however one major difference is present in these titles. You have to have Pikachu as your starter, and you are then given the Classic 3 as you play through the game. This change in formula can be used as an argument that Pokémon Yellow is more of a spin-off or a sideways step than a complete edition of Red and Blue. Speaking of Blue, that is actually the first Pokémon game that was the third title. Well, kind of anyway. In Japan, two titles were released, which were Pokémon Red and Pokémon Green. These games were instant hits, but Game Freak weren't happy with a few of the design choices they made in the games, so they released Pokémon Blue. This was a standalone title based on Red and Green, and it was essentially the same game, but just with graphical and gameplay improvements and upgrades. This Pokémon Blue would provide the base for Red and Blue that would then be released worldwide. The second generation of games would see what can be considered a true third installment. Pokemon Crystal was released around a year after Gold and Silver. However, Pokemon Crystal didn't actually add too many new additions, it was essentially minor changes to some routes. However, it holds the claim of having the first female playable character and also the first battle tower. The third generation of games continued this trend of releasing an improved and advanced third version. This time it was Pokémon Emerald. Many people do consider this to be the best Pokémon game, and that's because it changed a lot from the original games, giving gym leaders new teams, making the game harder, giving you the ability to get more legendaries, and tweaking the berry system. By far though, the best thing to be added in Emerald was the Battle Frontier, a post-game feature that gave the player so much more incentive to return to the game and essentially added a lot more depth to the game. This third game trend continued into Generation 4 with the release of Pokémon Platinum after Diamond and Pearl. Much like Emerald and Crystal, Pokémon Platinum added in a plethora of new features, with the main two being the VS Recorder and the addition of 59 additional more Pokémon that could be obtained. The Battle Frontier was also added and story elements were changed and expanded upon. One thing though I haven't mentioned yet is that all three of these games, Crystal, Emerald and Platinum, actually also removed Pokémon from them, which isn't something you'd expect to find in a complete edition of a game. This meant that to complete the Pokédex you needed access to one of the first two games of a generation anyway. Following on from this was the release of Black and White, and almost everyone expected a grey version to be released at some point, so some people did opt to wait for that release instead. However, what we got were direct sequels to the games in forms of Black and White 2. These games were different enough from the originals for it to warrant actually playing both. For a start, the play began in a different town, the gym leaders were different, the game's evil team was different, the legendary in the game was different, and the game featured new locations. This game also added a few new features that I for one really enjoyed and would love to see, such as the medals, which were an achievement-like system, and also added a difficulty setting. However, the difficulty setting was only obtainable after you had already completed the game, so it did require you to start a new game for some reason. Following on from this, we received X and Y. The legendaries in this game were called Xerneas and Yveltal, with Zargade being the third. Due to this, a lot of people expected a Pokemon Z, with the Zygarde being the game's cover mascot. Instead we got nothing. No third installment or sequel at all was made for this generation. Next we would get Sun and Moon. A leaked piece of information shows that Nintendo had been working on a project called Pokémon Stars. A lot of people thought this would be the third version of the game, as it does fit the space theme. Yet we actually received no official information regarding what Pokémon Stars ever was, and instead we received Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. People seem to be confused about what we need to consider these games as. Some do call them enhanced versions, while others consider them sequels. I personally would say they're their own entity and just kind of a sideways step. They provided new areas to the game, made 29 overall changes to the gameplay, as well as overhauling the entire story. The titles also included an additional 101 Pokemon, 5 of which were brand new to the franchise. Due to all of these changes made, they do feel like they are just a new game set in the same region, and because of this do belong as a separate entity to Sun and Moon. Finally we get to where we are now, Sword and Shield. It's highly unlikely that a third version of these games will ever see a release, as Game Freak have announced 2 DLC expansions for the titles, opting to go down the route of allowing people to expand the current game instead of buying a new one. It's hard to see where Game Freak will go from here, because it's clear that the trend of releasing a third title has gone, with the last one being over a decade ago. Since then we've had one sequel, One of them got nothing, we got a sideways step, and now this current one is getting DLC. This trend of uncertainty certainly matches the way the Pokemon games have been going in terms of quality and reception over the last few years. The golden age of the franchise coincided with the era of the third game. Since then, many of the games have been polarised in opinion, and Gamefreak seems to have lost their way a little. Maybe a return to previous idea could see the games rise back up to match its former glory. Well guys, that is the end of today's video. I do hope you all enjoyed it. Please do leave a comment below, let me know which third title you found to be the best. For me, I think Emerald was the best of the lot. Be sure to check out some of the videos you can see on screen now, and I will see you all in the next one.